Hello everyone, this is Jyotsna Hegde from NRI Pulse. We are here today with Kargil war hero Major-General G.D. Bakshi ji. Bakshi ji is in Atlanta to kick off the Independence Day celebrations hosted by the FIA, or the Federation of Indian Associations of Georgia. You're here for the Independence Day celebrations, so what I would like to start off with is to understand what independence itself means to you, particularly to India, what that means to you. And from your perspective, do you think that India is truly independent?
Now we are. Let me be very blunt and straightforward. Rituals tie us to our origins. Every time we have an Independence Day, we go back into our history. We re-establish for ourselves who we are. Where we are going depends a lot on where we came from. And therefore, it's very important to know how exactly you got your freedom. And a great part of my work post-retirement has been to take a look at our history and rectify it. You see, unless you own your history, you as a people would lose your identity, lose your special distinctive place in the universe that you have. The Russians, the Chinese, the French, their history is not written for them. At Harvard, it's not been outsourced to Harvard or to Oxford. They write their own history. Our tragedy was for 200 years we were colonized. And our educational system was revamped to produce very loyal, dedicated clerks, Macaulay's clerks. And then our history was written by Max Muller and the others. Mm-hmm. And now we find that we have to grow beyond, because there is so much evidence that is piled up. There's so much that has come in the field of satellite imagery, in the field of radiocarbon dating, etc., which has changed your history entirely. The history of the freedom struggle. Two of my books are on Bose, Netaji Subhash Chandra Bose. And I think we as Indians would be totally failing in our duties if we don't pay homage to or recognize the tremendous amount of contribution he made to our getting free. There is in India a doggerel called Dedi Hame Ajadi Bina Khadak Bina Dhal, etc. That means we got our freedom for free. We didn't have to get people killed for it, and we got it because we are so special. We got it because of ahimsa, we got it because of non-violence and satyagraha, and how just because of our sole force the British were forced to leave. It sounds very nice, but I'm afraid it's not true. And Mahatma Gandhi himself, an apostle of peace and the truth, would have been the first person to say that that was not the way it was. And actually, we've done a lot of research. We sent our scholars to London, where they did their research in the archives, National Archives, where there is the transfer of power documents. We identified the key British decision makers of that era, and they were Lord Clement Attlee, who was the Prime Minister from 1945 to 50. There was Pethick Lawrence, who was the Secretary of State for India. There was Field Marshal Wavell, who was the Viceroy. There was Field Marshal Auchinleck, who was the Commander-in-Chief of the British Indian Army. And then there were the governors of the various states. There was the Director of the Intelligence Bureau. There was the Director of Military Intelligence. All these key people. We went through their archives, we went through their letters, we went through every document, and we were amazed to find that the Quit India movement in 1942 had been launched by Gandhiji, right? And that was the last charge of the Congress, the last outright attempt for freedom. Are you aware that in the Congress Working Committee, every single Working Committee member had opposed the launching of the Quit India movement? Because surprisingly, towards the end, though Gandhiji was instrumental in throwing out Bose from the Congress party, but at the end they were on the same page. Nehru opposed the launch of the freedom struggle, the Quit India movement. Azad and everybody else opposed it, except Gandhiji said this will be done, and they launched it. And unfortunately for us, the British used 56 7 Gora Paltans. That means they used British troops. They did not use Indian troops. They used British troops, Australian, Canadians to crush this movement with a severity that was surprising because they were fighting a war. And they just did not want any pussyfooting around or any talk of something to disrupt their war effort. They were ruthless. Churchill was the prime minister, and when every single Congress leader was in prison, there was a total crackdown, and they pacified the whole thing within a matter of days, if not just weeks. They had finished the whole movement, was crushed. Every single Congress leader was put behind the bars. They were wiped out from the media. And within a few years, everybody had forgotten. And when Gandhiji went on fast, Churchill asked from London, why is he not dead? I mean, I could give a tuppence if he dies, etc. It was that way. So, in 1956, Lord Clement Attlee, the former Prime Minister of England, came to Kolkata. And he met, he was the personal guest of Justice P.B. Chakrabarti, who was then the governor of Bengal, West Bengal. And he had 2 days of a chat with him, and he asked him, look, the Quit India movement had failed dismally. You won the war in 1945. Why did you leave in such a tearing hurry in 47? What was it that caused you to leave? He said 3 words, Subhash Chandra Bose, Indian National Army. He said, we had put the INA officers, they may have lost the battle of Imphal and Kohima, but they won the war for independence because, when we put 3 INA officers on trial, there was mass scale uprising in the whole country. There were riots in Kolkata, riots in Delhi, riots in Lahore, riots in Mumbai, all over the country there was rioting. And, for the first time we saw that when the police opened fire, the mobs would not stop. They just kept coming on and on and on. And then, there was disaffection in the ranks of the Indian Army. 2.5 million men of the British Indian Army were then being demobilized. They had taken part in the war against Germany, against Japan. They had won on every battlefield. They were battle hardened and they were restive, they were angry, and we had lost their loyalty. So we knew we could not stay. That is the testimony of the man who signed the Independence of India Act. So then he asked him a very specific question. It may hurt some people, but I think we must face the truth. We must face the truth. And the truth is that he was asked by Justice Chakrabarti, what then was the role of Mahatma Gandhi's non-violent movement in the grant of India's independence? He said, Justice Chakrabarti says, and I quote directly, he said, Attlee's face twisted into a sarcastic smile as he spelt out or spat out the words M-I-N-I-M-A-L, minimal, come se come. That's coming from the man who signed the Independence of India Act. You see, when this first recommendation, we went through the correspondence of these key people. We went through there was an appreciation written by Field Marshal Auchinleck, the Commander-in-Chief. He says, we have just 40,000 British troops, white troops. There are 25 lakh Indian soldiers being demobilized. They are not obeying orders. And if they just start pelting stones, we will be finished. We have just 18 months. Let's go with grace. Let's go while we still have the power to shape events. We will lose that a little down the line because this army is restive. The loyalty of it has been eroded because of INA and Bose. And, he sent this to the Viceroy, who was also an old British Indian Army hand. He agreed. They sent this report to London, and London was shocked. And they said, have you old fogies lost your nerve? And that is the time Wavell shot back an angry letter. He says, if His Majesty's government deems that I have lost my nerve, it is their duty to replace me immediately. but they ignore my advice at their own peril. These are the words of Field Marshal Wavell, a battle experienced soldier. And the very next year, this is 45, I'm talking of November, December 1945 when all this is happening. And by February, 18th of February 1946 to be precise, how many of us really know? How many of us really know? I ask you. Do you know that there was a mutiny in the Royal Indian Navy? There was a revolt in the Royal Indian Navy, and you heard of the Sepoy Mutiny of 1857 which failed, but you have not been told of the mutiny that succeeded. You know, and out of 80 ships of the Royal Indian Navy, on 79 ships, the sailors, they hoisted down the Union Jack, put up the tricolor, threw their British officers into the sea, and they went around the streets of Mumbai and Karachi with portraits of Netaji, shouting Jai Hind, Jai Hind, Jai Hind. Then it was followed by a revolt in the Royal Indian Air Force, and that was followed by the first mutiny that broke out in the British Indian Army at Jabalpur in the signals and the EME units. When this happened, London lost its nerve. They knew it was time to go. They knew it was all over, bar the shouting. The Raj had come to an end. It was over. They realized it. And the next day, on 19th February, Pethick Lawrence was rushed to Delhi to work out the terms of transfer of power. But the tragedy is that power was not transferred to Bose or the INA. Power was transferred to people who had been the most loyal, so to speak, to the British, who were Anglophiles, and power went to Nehru. And Nehru's first act was to say that India's first Governor General would be Lord Louis Mountbatten. Now, utterly amazing, 200 years we've suffered their rule, you getting your freedom. The Pakistanis had the decency to appoint Muhammad Ali Jinnah as their first Governor General. But you appointed Lord Louis Mountbatten. You were so fond of the British. We weren't, Nehru was. He was Anglophile. And what is the first order that Mountbatten passes? None of the INA soldiers will be taken back into the Indian Army. They will be denied their wartime pensions. They died in poverty. Are you aware of the fact that the INA had a strength of 60,000? And out of them, 26,000 were killed fighting the British. 26,000 is not a small number, right? And you call that struggle non-violent? I mean, you have the cheek to call it non-violent? 26,000 Indian soldiers laid down their lives. You will not find one stone in India which bears their names. They died unsung. Because Nehru, to gain political legitimacy, spread the canard that, we won the freedom only because of ahimsa, non-violence, satyagraha, and the British were so moved by our soul force that they left, without a shot being fired. What a great freedom struggle. Excuse me. The British had really built up Gandhiji because he was very sincere. Gandhiji was very sincere in what he was doing. But the British were clever enough to use him to keep the Indian struggle non-violent. They feared violence. They did not fear non-violence. They could have continued with it. When Nelson Mandela followed the non-violence methods. When do you think South Africa got its freedom? 1994. 1994. Your freedom would not have come in 47 if we had remained non-violent. It may possibly have come around 1994, if at all. That is the harsh truth. And the earlier we learn to reconcile with it, we won't go wrong. Because where you are going as a nation state depends a lot on where you came from. And I'm very happy to tell you that with the advent of the Modi government in India, You know, one of the greatest acts that have been done by the Modi, Prime Minister Modi, was that on 21st of October last year, that is the date of the establishment of the Azad Hind government in exile in Singapore in 1943, the 75th anniversary of that event, he went to the Red Fort for a second time in 1 year. He goes every year on 15th of August, but he went for a second time at the Red Fort, and he unfurled the national flag. And along with him was a Naik, a soldier from the Indian National Army who was 99 years old, Naik Lalti Ram. In the company of an INA soldier, he unfurled the flag. You see, 4th of July is celebrated as America's Independence Day. This is the day on which the Declaration of Independence of them laid down their life. If India is free, a hell of a lot of credit for it goes to the Indian diaspora. Who, they really had their feelings. I'm very happy to state that when I come and meet the people of the diaspora, I find their levels of patriotism, their love for their country far higher than I see it amongst the people of India. And I'm telling you this as a fact. I have gone around the length and breadth of India. I've traveled, spoken to children. Of course, there is a massive, massive change coming through there. But the Indian diaspora, and even in the First World War, the Ghadar movement was supported by the Indian diaspora in the United States and Canada, right? So the diaspora has a major, major role to play in the reconstruction of your country, in your country becoming a superpower. The Chinese diaspora has played a major role in China becoming a major economic power, the number 2 economy of the world. The diaspora played that role. The Indian diaspora is doing so well. Half of NASA is Indians, half of Silicon Valley is Indian, half of the best medical experts in the United States of America are Indian. This is the best brain trust. We are the richest community in the whole of the United States. And I think it's about time that you now start paying back to the mother country and, taking it to greater and greater heights. And especially let me give you concrete examples. India wants to start manufacturing in the private sector, defense manufacture. We need to have tie-up with, military firms, armament firms in the United States, in Europe. Who's best qualified to do it? The Indian diaspora. We need transfer and transfusion of technology. Who's best qualified to do it but the Indian diaspora? So I think the diaspora in the future will have a very, very, very great role to play. And I would say as a model is the Jewish diaspora. Look at what they've done for Israel. So I'm sure our diaspora can do better. Because now we are richer than even the Jews.
Yeah, now Indians are established over here. Now they are more open to go after these things
Conclude. Thank you, Major General Bakshi, for talking to NRI Pulse. Thank you so much. It's an honor.